The airport loudspeaker cut through the quiet morning air like a blade. Flight Meridian Air 2290 to Dallas is now boarding. Marcus Reed lifted his head, his fingers tightening around the handle of his suitcase. He didn't know that the next 10 minutes would change the entire American aviation industry. Cold light poured down from the glass ceiling of O'Hare Airport, reflecting off the navy blue tailored suit Marcus always wore for major presentations. 3 years of relentless effort had led him here to become the youngest partner at Sterling and Keller Law. Today, he was flying to Dallas to meet with Lone Star Logistics, a deal that could bring in millions in revenue and potentially earn him an executive seat. Every step he took was calculated, every movement deliberate. Each line of his presentation, every gaze he would meet in the boardroom, was already rehearsed in his mind. He couldn't afford mistakes, not when he carried his father's words on his shoulders. "Son, you have to be twice as good just to be seen as equal." Henry Reed, a public high school history teacher, had said that one night when Marcus was 12, the day he was called by the wrong name at an award ceremony, because he didn't look like the top student. That moment had branded itself into Marcus's heart, becoming a silent vow that guided his life. Passing through security, Marcus handed over his pre-check card with a polite smile, but the agent's monotone voice halted him. "Sir, I'll need you to step aside for additional screening." He froze. He had grown used to it, but it still stung every time. Random, they always said. His leather suitcase was opened. Folders neatly stacked his Montblanc pen resting beside a phone charger. The agent rummaged through everything, then held up the power bank with suspicion. "What's this A portable charger?" Marcus replied evenly. "It's allowed." He didn't argue. He didn't let anger take over. He simply remembered his father's advice. Control what you can, your reaction, your composure, and your dignity. When his bag was finally returned, Marcus crouched to tie his shoelaces, taking a slow, steady breath. The irritation faded, but the sting lingered inside. In the first-class lounge, Marcus opened his laptop and reviewed his presentation slides one more time. The line, "Integrity is not a luxury. Its policy," glowed on the screen. He paused on that sentence, smiling faintly, without realizing it. At the boarding gate, the receptionist greeted him with a bright smile. "Good morning, Mr. Reed. You're flying first class, right?" Marcus nodded. But when she saw his name appear on the screen, her smile froze for just a moment. "Yes, the system's a bit slow, please hold on." He stood quietly. Seconds stretched into minutes. She typed a few more keys, then handed the ticket back. "Gate 18, to your right." Marcus thanked her. She didn't meet his eyes. Behind him, a white businessman in a grey jacket scanned his ticket and passed through in 2 seconds. Marcus walked on his smile, unchanged, but his eyes distant. Just a system glitch, he told himself, even though he knew this wasn't the first time the system had glitched only for him. The jetway leading to the plane was narrow and blindingly bright metal, gleaming under the morning light. The wheels of his suitcase rolled rhythmically as he checked his phone one last time, ensuring the client's email had been sent. At the aircraft door, he smiled politely and handed his ticket to the head flight attendant. "Good morning, I'm Karen Doyle," she said, her tone warm, but her eyes cold. "I'm sorry, but I think you're in the wrong line." Marcus stopped. "I have a first-class ticket. Are you sure? Quite sure." Karen examined the ticket for a long moment before looking up. "May I see your ID?" Marcus handed it over. She studied every detail, comparing his face to the photo. Passengers behind began to murmur. A man's voice whispered, "What's going on?" A woman replied, softly but audibly, He probably doesn't have a real ticket. Marcus's back stiffened. He felt his pulse pounding in his ears. He had faced prosecutors in crowded courtrooms without flinching. Yet he had never felt humiliation like this being questioned, simply because he didn't look like someone who belonged in first class. Karen spoke into her radio. "Paul, I need you at the gate immediately." Marcus stood still, breathing deeply, a storm of conflict inside him. Part of him wanted to drop the ticket and walk away. But the other part, the one forged through years of restraint, told him to stay, to hold his ground. Not for the seat, but for the principle of fairness. Paul Henderson, the cabin supervisor, arrived his tone, carrying practiced authority. "Sir, it seems there's been a mix-up. Please take a temporary seat in economy while we sort this out after takeoff." Marcus looked at him with a faint, steady smile. "No, thank you. I'll sit where I paid to sit." Paul folded his arms. "If you refuse to cooperate, I'll have to call security." The words hit like an explosion. A few passengers raised their phones to record. The air in the jetway grew tense and heavy. Marcus stood unmoving, calm, yet resolute, though his heart pounded like a war drum. Once again, he was being tested not by the law, but by the gaze of those who believed he didn't belong here. In his mind, he heard his father's voice. "You can't change the whole world in one day, but you can choose not to bow today." Marcus slowly lifted his head. The morning light streamed through the window, cutting across his dark skin like a blazing line of defiance. His voice was low, steady, and deliberate. "I will stand here until you do what's right." Silence fell like a curtain. The sound of approaching security echoed faintly from the distance. Every eye was fixed on him, the black man, the lawyer, the passenger who only wanted to sit in the seat he had rightfully earned. The aircraft door remained open, but no one moved. Only silence remained, the kind that comes just before justice finds its voice. The sound of security officers' footsteps echoed down the narrow jetway, the air thick and heavy, as if every breath waited for an invisible explosion. Marcus Reed stood tall, his gaze steady, his fingers gripping the first-class ticket, marked clearly with the words, "Seat 1, C First Class." Just a few steps away, Karen Doyle, the chief flight attendant, held on to a strained smile, the kind worn by people who believe they are simply following procedure. Beside her, Paul Henderson, the cabin supervisor, crossed his arms, his low voice carrying the authority of command. "So we have reason to believe your ticket may not be valid. If you refuse to cooperate, we'll have to ask you to leave the aircraft." Marcus said nothing. He met Paul's eyes not with anger, but with resolve. In that moment, he wasn't just a passenger. He was a man who had waited his entire life to say enough. Behind him, dozens of passengers had stopped. The murmurs faded, replaced by the soft chime of phones being unlocked, cameras opening lenses turning toward him. A middle-aged woman whispered, "Dear God, is this because he's black?" A man beside her muttered back, "Stay out of it." But not everyone stayed silent. From the front row of first class, Dr. Olivia Harper stood up, a renowned cardiologist, with her brown hair tied neatly back, her phone already recording. Her voice rang out clear and sharp, slicing through the tension like a blade. "I saw everything. He has a valid first-class ticket, and the 3 white passengers before him weren't questioned once." Karen turned her face, tightening. "Ma'am, please sit down. This is a security matter." "No," Olivia replied firmly. "This is a matter of prejudice." Her words fell like a spark into a pool of gasoline. A few people nodded, others gasped softly. Paul frowned, raising his radio quickly. Security to gate 18, passenger non-compliance. Within seconds, Officer Daniel Ruiz from Airport Security appeared tall and broad-shouldered. In his Navy uniform, his voice clipped and professional. "What seems to be the issue here?" Paul spoke quickly, trying to retain control. This passenger refused to follow crew instructions. "We have reason to suspect an issue with his ticket." Daniel nodded, turning to Marcus. "Sir, may I see your ticket and ID, please?" Marcus handed them over without hesitation, his tone calm and steady. "This is a valid ticket. I checked in this morning, and I'm a platinum member of this airline." Daniel examined the documents, carefully scanning the QR code before looking directly at Paul. "The ticket's valid. Seat 1C. Nothing's wrong." The silence that followed was absolute. Karen bit her lip. Paul forced an awkward smile. Well, perhaps the system made an error. Olivia's voice cut in sharp as glass. Was it the system that failed, or the people using it? Daniel glanced around at the dozens of phones recording the scene. He knew that one wrong move could become national news within minutes. Lowering his voice, he said, "I don't see any security threat here." Paul turned to Karen and muttered though loud enough for those nearby to hear. "You can't be too careful with passengers who don't usually sit in this section." Olivia's lips curved into a cold smile. "Did you just say, passengers who don't usually sit in this section? Are you implying that someone who looks like him doesn't belong in first class?" The whispers grew louder, swelling like a wave. Passengers from economy began standing up to see what was happening, phones rising to capture the image, a black man detained in the jetway between two white crew members, arguing over whether he was qualified to sit in first class. Inside the cockpit, Captain Andre Collins looked up at the noise coming through the intercom. "What's going on, Linda?" he asked his co-pilot. "I heard security's been called to gate 18. Andre frowned. After 25 years of flying, he needed only a few words to recognize this kind of problem. Removing his headset, he stood. The black captain's hat with silver wings rested on the console. He placed it on his head, straightened the 4 golden stripes on his shoulders, the unmistakable mark of command, and stepped out of the cockpit. The voices outside fell silent. The middle-aged black man with calm, commanding eyes and a steady, measured walk exuded a quiet authority that froze both Paul and Karen where they stood. What exactly is preventing my passenger from taking the seat he paid for? Andre's voice was low but resonant, each word deliberate. Paul stammered, "Captain, we were just verifying the ticket." There seemed to be some irregularities. What irregularities? Andre pressed. Well, the passenger was upgraded, and we hadn't confirmed. Andre cut him off his eyes, sharp as steel. "I've flown for this airline 27 years. I've never seen a valid ticket need extra confirmation just because the person holding it has a different color of skin." Karen lowered her head, her voice trembling. "We were only following instructions, Captain." "Whose instructions?" Andre demanded. "Passenger behavior models," she mumbled. Andre let out a humorless laugh. "So if I walked up here today in civilian clothes, would you have stopped me at the door too?" No one answered. Only the faint static of the radio and the blinking boarding light filled the silence. Andre turned to Officer Ruiz. "Officer, do you see any security issue here?" "No," Captain Daniel replied. "Ticket and ID are valid." "Good." Andre faced Marcus, his voice warm but firm. "Mr. Reed, please take your seat at 1C. On behalf of the airline, I apologize for the inconvenience." Marcus walked past Karen every step, echoing through the stunned silence. A few passengers began to clap softly. Olivia nodded to him, her expression filled with respect. Paul tried to salvage his dignity, opening his mouth to speak, but Andre's tone cut through sharply. "Mr. Henderson, if you obstruct another paying passenger from boarding again, I will have this entire crew replaced immediately." The words landed like a hammer. No one spoke after that. Marcus took his seat in 1C, drawing a long, steady breath. The sunlight through the window cast a golden reflection across his face. In that moment, he no longer felt anger, only exhaustion, the kind that comes from years of having to prove that you deserve what you've already earned twice over. Olivia leaned toward him and said softly, "You did the right thing. Sometimes one person standing tall is enough to change the entire sky." Marcus smiled faintly, though behind it lingered a quiet weight. He didn't yet know that, as those passengers' phones continued recording the footage of him taking his seat, would soon surge across the nation like a storm. Back in the cockpit, Captain Andre removed his hat and exhaled. "I've seen this too many times," he said quietly. But today, at least, someone didn't stay silent. He didn't yet realize that this small act, the courage of one man, the witness of another, was about to ignite a movement that would shake the entire airline industry. And in first class, as Marcus closed his eyes, he had no idea that out there millions were about to call his name. The sound of the cabin door closing rang out dry and final. The Meridian Air Boeing 737 still had not taken off. Under the soft golden lights, the air in the first-class cabin felt like it was holding on to the last heat of a storm that had just passed. Marcus Reed sat still in seat 1C, his seatbelt fastened, his eyes fixed straight ahead. He tried to calm himself, but his mind was still raging. The same question kept looping in his head. Why? Why even in the year 2025 do I still have to prove that I deserve to sit here? 3 rows behind him, Dr. Olivia Harper was still holding her phone. She replayed the video she had just recorded, Marcus being stopped at the aircraft door. The suspicious look in Karen Doyle's eyes, the condescending tone in Paul Henderson's voice, then the firm intervention of Captain Andre Collins. Everything was clear, impossible to twist. "People need to see this," Olivia murmured. The middle-aged businessman next to her nodded slightly. "You thinking of posting it?" Olivia replied. "I do not know. But justice cannot live only inside my phone." A few rows away, Jamal Brooks, a 28-year-old influencer who focused on social justice, was live streaming. His face tilted toward the camera, his voice slow but firm. "You are watching live from Meridian Air. Flight 2290. A black lawyer with a valid ticket was denied his first-class seat, and only when the captain, who is also black, showed up, did he finally get to sit where he belonged. On his screen, the viewer count shot up 5,000, 12,000, then 28,000. The comment section exploded. "Unbelievable. This is the 21st century, and we are still here. Someone please tag first-class citizen." The hashtag was born out of that very surge of outrage. In the last row, a young couple looked at each other. The wife whispered, all he wanted was to sit in the seat he paid for. Her husband squeezed her hand. Yes, and they still tried to shove him to the back. No one spoke loudly, but everyone in the cabin understood. They had just witnessed something that was not simply a service mistake. It was an old wound being cut open right in front of them, a wound of prejudice and suspicion that still existed in a world that pretended it had already moved on. Captain Andre Collins stepped out again, radio in hand, speaking with ground control. "Tower, this is Meridian, 2290. Why have we still not been cleared for takeoff?" The radio crackled back. Company is requesting that you hold position, Captain. Await direct instruction. Andre glanced at his first officer, Michael Chen, and shrugged. Headquarters knows? That video is probably on fire online, Michael said, half joking. Andre did not laugh. He understood very clearly the power of social media and the unpredictable fallout when injustice is exposed on a live stream. At Meridian Air headquarters in Dallas, the wall clock had just reached 9:17 in the morning. Communications manager Ethan Powell was sipping his coffee when a red alert flashed on his computer screen. High alert mention spike detected. He clicked. A live stream with tens of thousands of viewers title, Black Lawyer Denied First Class Seat Until Pilot Stepped In. Ethan shot to his feet. Oh my God. He ran straight into the communications room. We have a media crisis flight, 2290, from Chicago to Dallas. The video is going viral. Within 3 minutes, CEO Richard Lawson had the report. He was in a meeting with the board of directors, but when he saw the image of Marcus being blocked, his face darkened. Pause this meeting, Richard said, his voice low. Call the crisis team. Hold that flight on the ground. No one takes off until I say so. He knew very well that a 10-minute delay in response could brand Meridian Air as a racist airline, a stab straight into the heart of the brand he had spent 15 years rebuilding. On the plane, passengers were growing restless. Someone asked, "Why are we still on the ground?" Olivia looked up. "They are probably dealing with the fallout." Marcus heard her but said nothing. He opened his laptop and stared at his presentation slides about fair and equitable legal solutions. The irony was sharp. He himself was now the living example of the very injustice he'd talked about. A message popped up on his phone. Robert Lang. "We have seen the video. Marcus, the entire firm is behind you. Do not worry about the presentation. The client already knows what happened. They want to meet you not just for business." He drew in a deep breath. Part of him wanted to forget everything and simply do the job he had prepared for. But another part, the part that had been stopped at security lines, the part that had heard the word random too many times, said, "No, this time has to be different." At Meridian Air headquarters, Richard Lawson was in an emergency meeting. Vice President of Customer Experience, Monique Ellis, spoke quickly. "We need a human response, not a polished PR script. The public wants to see real accountability, not vague statements." Richard nodded. "Monique, get on that flight. Right now? You're the only one I trust to handle this." Monique answered, "I will be on my way in 10 minutes. She knew this was not just an assignment. It was a test of the airline's integrity and of her own as a black woman who had once been dismissed on the very flights her company operated. Back in the cabin, Marcus was reading a new message from his father. "Son, your mother and I saw the news. Remember, pride does not lie in where you are allowed to sit. It lies in the fact that you did not stand up to walk away." He smiled faintly. His father always knew exactly what to say at the right moment. The overhead speakers crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We are awaiting instructions from the airline. We apologize for the delay." The cabin filled with low chatter. One passenger said, "They are being filmed. They are afraid of a scandal." Another replied, "Afraid now. It is too late. The internet has already blown up." On Jamal Brooks's phone, the viewer count had passed 100,000. He spoke to his audience. "They are holding the plane, people. My guess is the airline leadership is about to step in. This could be a turning point for the entire industry." Comments poured in like a waterfall. "Demand a press conference now. Fire those crew members. Marcus Reed, the man who would not bow. Marcus's name began appearing on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Civil rights organizations tagged the airline, demanding an investigation. The first posts were already being shared hundreds of thousands of times. First-class citizen became a nationwide trending topic in just 40 minutes. In Dallas, Monique Ellis boarded the company's private jet. She read the summary report. Original video, 1 minute 37 seconds, more than 4 million views. 2 crew members, Karen Doyle and Paul Henderson. Affected passenger, Marcus Reed, attorney partner at Sterling and Keller. Key witness, Dr. Olivia Harper, Captain Andre Collins, who had intervened by the book. Monique took a deep breath. I am not going to let this company say, "We are sorry." Like a machine again, she thought. This time someone is going to be held accountable. Over Chicago, the midday light began to stream through the oval windows. Marcus looked outside, watching ground crew workers moving below, unaware that a story was shaking the entire country above their heads because of a single seat. He wondered quietly, how many more times will this happen if no one speaks up? At that moment, his phone vibrated with a new notification. Monique Ellis, Vice President Customer Experience, is boarding Flight 2290. He lifted his head, a faint sense of foreboding rising in his chest. Maybe the storm was about to reach its peak, but right here, in this metal tube, suspended in the sky, a different kind of awakening was about to begin. The low hum of jet engines echoed faintly through the aircraft's metal shell. Inside, the air felt thick, heavy. Everyone could sense it. Something was coming. Marcus Reed sat upright, his gaze fixed on the window, but peace had long left his mind. His phone buzzed constantly with hundreds of new notifications, messages, emails, missed calls. The entire world was watching this flight, and all he had wanted was a quiet trip to Dallas to deliver a business presentation. But fate never asked for his permission. At the front of the plane, Captain Andre Collins received a radio call. Meridian 2290, hold position. A company representative would be boarding to address the situation directly. Andre glanced at his first officer, Michael Chen. A company representative. They have never done that during a flight delay. Must be serious, Michael replied. Andre nodded slightly, his expression thoughtful. He had faced many emergencies before, engine failures, unruly passengers, even medical incidents. But this time the problem was not mechanical, it was human. At the departure gate, several airline staff hurried down the jetway, clearing the way for a woman in a navy suit with neatly tied black hair. It was Monique Ellis, Vice President of Customer Experience for Meridian Air. At 52, Monique was no stranger to crisis, but she had never encountered anything like this, a video spreading worldwide in less than an hour, shaking an entire nation. Security officers opened the aircraft door. Daylight flooded in. Every passenger turned at once, their eyes fixed on the woman stepping inside. She carried no assistants, no PR team, only the ID badge on her chest. Monique Ellis, Vice President, Meridian Air. Captain Collins stepped out of the cockpit, greeting her with a nod. Good to see you, Monique. I assume you've heard I've seen the entire video, Monique replied, her voice calm, but her eyes as sharp as steel. And I'm not here to let this be buried like all the times before. Her gaze swept across the cabin, passengers clutching their phones, cameras still recording. No one spoke, but everyone was waiting to see what she would do. Monique walked straight to the front row. Marcus Reed looked up. Mr. Reed. Yes, Marcus answered, his tone steady. "I'm Monique Ellis, representing Meridian Air," she said. "I'm here to say the only thing this company needs to say to you. We were wrong." The cabin went silent. No excuses. No corporate script about ongoing investigation. Just 4 words, plain, honest, and heavy. Monique continued. "You were discriminated against, not by the system, but by people, and that is something that cannot be justified." Her voice was steady, each word falling like a gavel. A few passengers bowed their heads. Dr. Olivia Harper nodded slightly, her eyes glimmering. Monique didn't lower her voice, even knowing every camera was recording. "I want everyone on this flight to hear me clearly. 2 employees mishandled this situation and have been suspended immediately. I'm not here to offer a polite apology. I'm here to take responsibility." At the back of the cabin, Karen Doyle and Paul Henderson, the 2 employees at the center of the incident, stood frozen. Their faces had turned pale as Monique turned towards them. "Ms. Doyle, Mr. Henderson, collect your belongings. Your replacements are on the way." Karen tried to speak, her voice trembling. "Vice President, we were just following procedure. There is no procedure that permits the humiliation of a customer." Monique interrupted firmly. "And there is certainly no procedure that excuses prejudice." Paul stood speechless. Karen's eyes welled with tears, but Monique didn't waver. She knew this moment would be analyzed by millions, but the only thing that mattered was justice. Dr. Olivia Harper rose from her seat. "Ms. Ellis," she said, "I'm a witness. I'm willing to provide the video and a formal statement." Monique turned and smiled gratefully. "Thank you, Dr. Harper. Your courage made it impossible for us to look away." The cabin lights reflected off Monique's face, making her eyes gleam like forged steel. She turned to address everyone. "Meridian Air will take full responsibility, and that begins with this flight." The cabin door opened again. 2 new attendants entered, Michelle Davis and Derek Wilson, both seasoned professionals known for their excellence. They bowed to the passengers, taking the place of the former crew who quietly exited. As Karen and Paul passed by Marcus, they avoided his gaze. Marcus said nothing. He simply looked at them, not with resentment, but with the calm of a man who had endured enough and this time had witnessed justice arrive. A round of applause began from the back, hesitant at first, then spreading through the cabin. The clapping wasn't for the scandal, it was for sincerity. Monique bowed her head slightly. "Thank you, everyone." She turned to Marcus. "Mr. Reed, I know words aren't enough. We've arranged private accommodations for you at the 4 Seasons in Dallas, along with transportation to your meeting. Not as compensation, but as the minimum respect you should have always received," Marcus replied softly. "I appreciate your honesty. But this isn't just about me." Monique smiled faintly. "I know. That's why I'm here." Returning to the front, she signaled the captain. "Mr. Collins, we're ready for takeoff." "Understood." The engines roared to life beneath the cabin floor. Inside, no one spoke. Most passengers stared down at their phones. New videos, new headlines, new hashtags. Meridian Air flooded social media, but this time the comments had changed. A true leader. Finally, someone brave enough to admit fault. I've never seen an airline respond this fast. Over the Chicago sky, the aircraft began to taxi down the runway. Sunlight angled through the windows, catching Marcus's reflection. He looked down, seeing his shadow in the glass, a silent man while the world spoke for him. Beside him, Dr. Olivia Harper whispered, "I think she truly wants to make a change." Marcus nodded. "I hope so. But I've learned that real change doesn't start with words. It starts with actions repeated over time." She smiled softly. And sometimes it starts with just one person, the one who refuses to move. Captain Collins switched on the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. We'll be taking off shortly. Today I want to remind everyone of one thing on this plane. Every person deserves equal respect." Applause erupted. Marcus closed his eyes, letting the sound of the engines fill his mind. He didn't know if this flight would take him to Dallas or into history. Outside, the sky opened wide, clear and blue as freshly polished glass. The plane ascended, carrying not just 120 people, but a message soaring across the world. The engines roared as the Meridian Air Boeing 737 lifted off the ground, soaring into the blue sky. Under the sunlight, the metal wings gleamed brightly, but inside the cabin every gaze was still fixed on one man. Marcus Reed, the man in seat 1C, the man who just a few hours earlier had been questioned for not belonging there. No one spoke loudly, yet the air was charged with something unfamiliar, an energy that lingered between rows. Whispers drifted through the cabin. "I've never seen an airline apologize publicly like that. She did what so many others are afraid to do. That man, I think he just changed something bigger than himself." Marcus heard every word, even though they spoke softly. He sat still, hands resting on the folded tray table, eyes gazing out at the sky, where white clouds drifted by. Everything had happened so fast, from humiliation to justice, from a small act to a national reckoning. He had never sought the spotlight. He had only wanted to fly like everyone else. But now the world was watching him. Dr. Olivia Harper opened her laptop and began typing an email to the Boston Herald, attaching the video as her statement. She knew Jamal Brooks's live stream had already gone viral, but she wanted a reliable outlet to tell the story accurately. As she typed, she replayed that moment in her mind, Marcus standing in the jetway, not shouting, not slamming his fists, simply saying, "I will stand here until you do what's right." Such simple words, yet she knew their power came from calmness, the kind that only comes after a lifetime of learning how to endure pain quietly. In the back of the plane, Jamal Brooks was still live streaming, even though the flight was now cruising at altitude. "Hey everyone, I'm 35,000 feet in the air, and yes, this flight is still the center of the nation's attention. The passenger who faced discrimination has received a public apology, and Meridian Air's vice president handled the situation right here on this plane. I've never seen anything like it." Comments flooded the screen like waves. "Who is he?" "We need to know his name." Marcus Reed, a lawyer from Chicago, the man who stood still in the face of injustice. First-class citizen is trending #1 nationwide. The views surged 400,000, then 700,000. Thousands of people edited clips, added powerful music, and turned that moment into a symbol of resilience. At Meridian Air's Operations Center, CEO Richard Lawson watched streams of data flash across the giant monitors. The graphs climbed higher every minute as tens of thousands more mentioned the airline. The head of communications reported, "The hashtag first-class citizen has passed 2.3 million posts. Politicians, celebrities, and business leaders are sharing it." "Negative or positive?" Richard asked. Strangely enough, 85% positive. People are praising Monique Ellis for her fast and honest response. Richard leaned back, gripping his pen tightly. He knew this storm was only beginning. "Good," he said, his voice low. "But don't let the public think this was a miracle. We need to turn it into a system." High above the clouds, Marcus still hadn't closed his eyes. A new flight attendant, Michelle Davis, approached him gently. "Mr. Reed, the captain asked me to give you this note." He unfolded the paper. The handwriting was strong and precise. "Mr. Reed, no one should ever have to prove their worth just to be treated with respect. I apologize on behalf of everyone who ever made you feel that way. When we land, I'd like to buy you a cup of coffee. Captain Andre Collins." Marcus smiled a quiet smile, not of triumph, but of understanding. He folded the note and placed it against his chest. Perhaps justice sometimes begins with nothing more than a sincere apology. 3 rows behind, Olivia spoke softly to an older woman. "I used to think discrimination was a thing of the past, but this morning I saw that it's still alive." The woman's voice trembled as she replied, "And then I saw a black man refuse to bow his head. You know that made me want to be better." The words were barely louder than a breath, yet they carried the weight of change. 2 hours later, as the plane began its descent, Marcus's phone vibrated once more. It was a message from his father, Henry Reed. "Son, I saw the video. Your mother cried. The whole neighborhood is talking about you. But do you know what makes me proudest? Not that you won, but that you stayed calm when you were disrespected. That's the strength I hope the world learns from you." Marcus read it again and again, his eyes stinging. For years he had thought he was fighting alone. But now he realized that in every moment of his calm, his father was there. The man who had taught him that justice doesn't need to shout it, only needs to stand firm. In Dallas, by the time the plane landed, a crowd of reporters had already gathered outside the gate. The news had spread so fast that local TV stations had sent live broadcast vans. "Marcus Reed is landing any moment now," the reporter announced, his voice brimming with excitement, as if waiting for a hero to appear. In the cabin, Captain Andre turned on the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are preparing to land in Dallas. Before we conclude, I'd like to say one thing. Today we didn't just fly across the sky, we crossed an old line. Respect is not a privilege. It's a standard. And on this flight, that standard has just been rewritten." The cabin erupted in applause. Some passengers stood, others wiped away tears. As the plane touched down, Marcus closed his eyes. That soft thud against the runway felt to him like confirmation that something had truly begun. Not because he had won an argument, but because millions had seen, had spoken, and had awakened. He gathered his things, straightened his tie. The shame of the morning was gone, replaced by the calm of a man who knew he had become part of something greater than himself. The aircraft door opened. Light poured in, blinding and bright, followed by the clicks of cameras and the shouts of reporters calling his name. Marcus stepped out, his stride steady. In the distance, a woman in a grey suit waited Alicia Grant, the renowned civil rights attorney. She smiled and extended her hand. "Welcome, Mr. Reed. Your story is no longer just yours. It's the beginning of a new chapter." Marcus shook her hand as hundreds of people recorded the moment. An ordinary man who once chose to stand still for 10 minutes had now become a symbol of change. The cabin door swung open, flooding the space with white light. A wave of passengers stood all at once as hundreds of flashes and cameras from the distance lit up the scene. Marcus Reed stepped out, suitcase in hand, his navy suit still perfectly pressed, as if nothing had happened. Yet beneath that calm exterior, his heart pounded heavily in his chest. He was not a man accustomed to noise, not someone who sought the spotlight, yet now every lens was turned toward him, the man who had simply wanted to sit in the seat he paid for. Outside the gate, a crowd waited. Reporters, security staff, curious onlookers, and even protesters holding hastily made signs that read, "Respect has no color, and we are all first-class citizens." Microphones rose into the air, voices calling out urgently. "What? Reed, how did it feel to be discriminated against on the plane? Are you planning to sue Meridian Air? What message do you have for other black travelers?" The flashes were blinding, forcing Marcus to squint. Before he could speak, a woman's voice rang out beside him. "Excuse me, Mr. Reed will not be answering any questions at this time." The woman stepped forward. Alicia Grant, a seasoned civil rights attorney, tall with neatly tied curls and a pale grey suit. Her tone was firm but composed. "I am Mr. Reed's legal representative. If you have questions, please direct them to our office in Chicago." A reporter pressed closer. "Ms. Grant, could this incident lead to a class action lawsuit? We're reviewing the matter," Alicia replied calmly. "But right now, our priority is Mr. Reed's safety and privacy." Marcus glanced at her with gratitude. She returned a faint smile and gestured for him to follow. As they moved away from the crowd, a uniformed airline manager approached. His name tag read, "Logan Pierce, Airport Manager, Dallas." "Mr. Reed, Vice President Monique Ellis, has arranged transportation for you. There's also someone who'd like to meet you right now." Marcus looked up to see a man approaching through a ring of security guards. Richard Lawson, CEO of Meridian Air. Dressed in a black suit with a silver tie, his face was solemn. No press entourage, no fanfare, only the quiet resolve of a man ready to take responsibility. Richard extended his hand. "I'm Richard Lawson. I came to apologize in person." Marcus shook it, studying his expression. "I appreciate you coming here. I didn't expect the CEO of an airline to show up at the airport. Some mistakes, Richard said, can't be fixed with press statements, only with action." For a few seconds they simply looked at each other, one man representing authority, the other representing dignity. Both understood this was no longer about a first-class seat. Richard led Marcus and Alicia to a VIP lounge that had been turned into an emergency meeting room. Inside, Monique Ellis was already waiting, joined by company lawyers and the communications director. Monique stood, her voice steady as it had been on the plane. "Thank you for not walking away, Mr. Reed. Because of you, we're forced to face ourselves." Marcus set down his bag, folding his arms. "I don't want this turned into a PR campaign. I just want to make sure this never happens again." Richard nodded, responding directly. "I understand, and I'd like you to help us make sure of that." The room fell silent. "You're a lawyer, you understand systems. Help us rebuild ours. I want Meridian Air to become the first airline with a passenger equity council, one with real independent authority. Not a PR committee, but a governing body with power." Alicia tilted her head, cautious. "That sounds promising, but promises are easy. Are you willing to make that commitment public today?" Richard met her eyes. "Within the hour." Outside, reporters still crowded the concourse. When Richard and Monique stepped out, they didn't hide. A small podium had been set up in the terminal, and hundreds of cameras pointed forward. Richard began. "Today, Meridian Air acknowledges a truth. We failed to uphold fairness and respect. One of our passengers, Mr. Marcus Reed, was treated unfairly without reason and without excuse." His words echoed through the terminal. He paused, then continued. "Effective immediately, I've suspended the 2 employees involved and launched a full internal investigation. But we will not stop at apologies. Meridian Air will establish a National Passenger Equity Council made up of civil rights, experts, attorneys, and passenger representatives with full authority to propose reforms and publish public reports. Behind him, Monique stepped up to the microphone. What happened this morning is not a moment of shame for a single airline. It's a wake-up call for an entire industry. And we choose not to hide, but to change. The press erupted with questions. One shouted, "Mr. Reid, how do you respond to this announcement?" Marcus stepped forward to the podium surrounded by bright lights. He hadn't prepared a speech, but his words came straight from the heart. "I didn't come here to sue or to be compensated. I just want to be treated like everyone else, with respect. I don't want my son to grow up learning how to endure what I did. I want him to fly, to live, to work, without anyone asking, 'Are you sure this place is yours?'" His voice grew heavier near the end, then softened. "I thank everyone who spoke up, and even those who simply shared the video quietly. Because sometimes justice doesn't need to shout, it just needs to be seen." Applause erupted across the terminal. Many reporters set their cameras down and joined in the clapping. That afternoon, the story spread across every network and social platform. CNN's headline read, "Airline CEO bows to apologize. Black lawyer becomes new symbol of justice." On Twitter, First Class Citizen remained the top trend, now accompanied by a photo of Monique standing beside Marcus, with the words behind them, "Equality takes flight." Later in the car, Marcus sat beside Alicia. She turned to him with a small smile. "You know they just offered me a role as an advisor on that council." "And you're going to accept?" Marcus asked. "Of course. But I want you to join me. I already have a job." Marcus, Alicia said softly, "Your job is to defend justice. This is your chance to reshape it." Marcus looked out the window, where the Dallas sunset burned gold across the sky. In the glass reflection, he saw himself not a man who had been humiliated, but one who had opened a door for thousands of others. In Meridian Air's top-floor office, Richard Lawson stood by the window watching as reporters finally began to disperse. Monique entered quietly. "Do you think the public will believe us?" she asked. Richard replied, "Belief isn't enough. We have to make them see." He turned his eyes sharper than ever. "From this moment on, justice will no longer be our PR concept. It will be our operating system." The news spread faster than any plane that had ever taken off. Within 2 hours, the name Marcus Reid had blanketed every corner of social media. Major networks, CNN, BBC, Fox, even Al Jazeera all broadcast the same clip, a black man standing calmly in the jetway, facing injustice with composure, then bowing his head in gratitude as justice arrived. On Twitter, the hashtag #FirstClassCitizen ignited like a spark in the wind, surpassing 5 million shares in less than a day. In a small cafe in New York, a group of black students from Columbia University replayed the clip. One girl whispered, "He didn't shout. He just stood still." A young man replied, "Yeah, but the way he stood, it made the whole system stop." In an airport lounge in Atlanta, a group of pilots watched the same video. Among them was Jerome Williams, a veteran black captain who nodded. Andre Collins did what many of us have been too afraid to do, not because of the rules, but because of the consequences. But he made the right choice. The story was no longer just news, it had become a symbol. Meanwhile, Meridian Air was entering uncharted territory, a full-scale national media storm. The company's crisis room operated through the night. On the wall, dozens of screens displayed live data charts. Monique Ellis sat at the center, dark circles under her eyes, but mind sharp as ever. "Do we have updated data?" she asked. The communications director replied, "Positive sentiment is climbing. People are praising our quick apology and immediate action. But they want to see real change, and they will," Monique said. "By morning, I want a complete anti-bias training proposal on my desk. Every frontline employee participates. No exceptions." A young staffer hesitated. "Even Captain Collins, including me," Monique said firmly. "Change excludes no one." Back in Chicago, Sterling and Keller Marcus's law firm was in turmoil. The meeting room on the 26th floor glowed under harsh fluorescent lights. Managing partner Robert Lang set his phone on the table and looked around. "We have two choices," he said. "Either we let Marcus handle this alone, or we turn it into an opportunity to create real change in our industry." A junior lawyer spoke softly. He never wanted to be a symbol. He just wanted peace. Robert sighed. "I know. But he's already become part of history, whether he wanted it or not. The question is, will he let history write him, or will he write it himself?" In Washington, D.C. Congressman Charles Benton, chairman of the House Transportation Committee, watched the video for the third time. He set his coffee cup down, his voice low. "This isn't an isolated incident. This is a snapshot of a systemic illness." His aide asked, "What would you like to do, sir?" "Prepare a hearing file," Benton replied. "I want representatives from every major airline in 30 days, and invite Mr. Marcus Reed." The decision was made quietly, but its impact would ripple across the nation. The next morning, Marcus woke up in the hotel room Meridian Air had arranged for him at the Four Seasons. Outside the window, the Dallas sky blazed bright, as if the world had never known darkness. He had never felt more exhausted, but he had never felt more meaningful either. His phone rang. It was his father, Henry Reed. "Son, the entire school is talking about you," his father said. "The students asked why people would treat you that way. I told them one thing, because the world is still learning to see people the way you do, with reason, not with color." His voice wavered. "I'm proud of you, Marcus. Not because people know your name, but because you kept your dignity, even in anger." Marcus sat in silence. He had never heard his father speak so long before. At the same time, civil rights attorney Alicia Grant was in a meeting with representatives from the nation's leading human rights groups, ACLU, NAACP, and the Equal Justice Alliance. "This is our chance to set a precedent," she said, her tone unwavering. "If we file a class action, not just Meridian Air, but the entire industry will have to change." Someone asked, "What about Marcus? Does he agree?" Alicia replied, "He hasn't decided. He's not seeking justice for himself. He's seeking it for those who come after." Meanwhile, at Meridian Air's Dallas headquarters, CEO Richard Lawson addressed the international press. His voice was deep calm. "Our greatest mistake wasn't that the incident happened. It's that we allowed people to feel they had to fight to be respected." Starting today, Meridian Air will publish our complaint data publicly every quarter. No hiding. No delay. We are not just apologizing, we are rebuilding. A reporter asked, "Aren't you worried about financial losses?" Richard smiled faintly. "Money can be earned back. Trust cannot." The quote spread like wildfire, shared millions of times in 24 hours. That afternoon, Marcus met Monique Ellis again in the hotel lobby. She was still in her navy suit, exhaustion etched across her face. "I owe you thanks, Marcus," she said. "No one likes seeing the truth exposed, but you forced us to face it." "I didn't do anything special," Marcus replied. "I just refused to give up my seat." Monique let out a small laugh, a tired, bittersweet sound. Sometimes it only takes one person refusing to move to make an entire system shift. She handed him an envelope. This is an official invitation from Congress. They want you to testify at the upcoming hearing." Marcus opened it and read the printed words, "House Transportation Committee Hearing on Discrimination in Air Travel." He stayed silent for a long time. That night, as Dallas glowed beneath the golden city lights, Marcus sat by the window. The city shimmered below him like a web of light connecting millions of lives people he would never meet, but who now knew his name because of a single quiet act. His phone rang. It was Dr. Olivia Harper. "I just wanted to thank you," she said. "You didn't just stand up for yourself. You made people like me, people who once stayed silent, feel that we have to speak." Marcus chuckled softly. "We're all passengers on the same flight, aren't we?" "Yes," Olivia replied. "And this time I believe that flight is headed in the right direction." At that very hour in Chicago, a group of high school students were giving a presentation titled "Dignity and Justice in Modern Life." On the screen was the image of Marcus standing in the jetway, light slanting across his face, a sea of people filming behind him. The student at the podium spoke with a trembling voice, but his words carried pride. "This isn't just the story of one black man. It's the story of anyone who's ever been told they weren't good enough to stand where they belong." 3 weeks after the incident, Washington, D.C. awoke to an unusual morning. On the steps of the Capitol building, hundreds of reporters, activists, and citizens gathered. No one came to protest or cheer, they came to listen. Inside the House Transportation Committee chamber was packed. The television cameras were rolling live. In the front row sat the witnesses Marcus Reed, Monique Ellis, Captain Andre Collins, Dr. Olivia Harper, and Alicia Grant, the civil rights attorney representing the victims. At the podium, Congressman Charles Benton raised the gavel, his voice cutting through the silence. "Today we are not investigating a single incident. We are examining a system that has made Americans question whether their dignity holds a different value at 35,000 feet. When Marcus's name was called, the room fell quiet. He stepped to the microphone, holding his written statement, the sunlight from the high windows casting across his calm face. "Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and those watching," he began, his tone deep and steady. "I did not come here to recount humiliation. I came to talk about a habit, the habit of doubting those who look different." He paused, meeting the eyes of the lawmakers. "I am an attorney, an American citizen, and a father. I worked hard, paid for my ticket, and only wanted to sit in the seat I earned. But in a few minutes, I became the target of scrutiny, asked to step aside, not because of my actions, but because of my appearance." The air in the room thickened. Cameras zoomed in on his face, composed, but his eyes carried a quiet storm. If there had been no video, I might have been labeled an unruly passenger. But thanks to someone who spoke up and a captain who acted with integrity, the truth was not twisted. My only hope is that after today, no one will need a camera to be treated fairly. Dr. Olivia Harper spoke next. She described the moment she saw Marcus being stopped, how the crew's suspicion fell only on him, her voice trembling with outrage. "I am a doctor. I understand what a misdiagnosis looks like. And that morning they misdiagnosed a human being." The chamber erupted in applause, a rare break in congressional decorum. Then Captain Andre Collins took the stand, his uniform crisp, the 4 gold bars on his shoulders gleaming. "I've been flying for more than 25 years. I've had passengers ask me if I'm really the pilot. That day when I saw Marcus being treated that way, I did the only thing a man who respects his profession should do: stop the wrong before it took off." Finally, Monique Ellis rose to speak. She didn't read from notes. Her voice was low but unwavering. Aviation once represented freedom. Yet inside those very first-class cabins we built invisible walls. I'm not proud of the incident, but I am proud that we did not look away. She turned toward Marcus, her eyes filled with respect. Without you, Mr. Reed Meridian Air would still be asleep in its own complacency. When the hearing concluded, Congressman Benton delivered the closing statement. This committee will introduce the Passenger Equity and Fairness Act, requiring all airlines to publicly disclose discrimination, complaints, implement mandatory unconscious bias training, and establish independent oversight mechanisms. A wave of applause swept through the room, rippling like surf against the shore. Stepping outside, Marcus looked up at the Washington sky. A bird flew over the Capitol dome, free, small, yet powerful. Beside him, Alicia Grant said softly, "You just turned your humiliation into law." Marcus smiled, calm and sincere. "Not me," he replied. "Us the ones who refused to stay silent." That afternoon, national television replayed Marcus's testimony. Across millions of homes, people paused their meals and their work just to hear him say one line: "Justice is not a reward. It is the default right of every human being boarding the flight of life." That night, atop the Meridian Air headquarters in Dallas, a new slogan shone in bright LED lights: "Equality takes flight when justice learns to fly." And somewhere in the quiet glow of the city, Marcus sat alone in his temporary apartment. He replayed the old video himself, standing in the jetway, eyes steady toward the camera, unaware that moment had ignited a movement. He smiled faintly. Justice doesn't arrive in a single day, but it was on its way. 6 months later, America had changed. Every major airline had adopted the Passenger Equity Code, a direct result of that historic hearing. At Meridian Air headquarters, Captain Andre Collins was appointed Director of Service Ethics Training, while Monique Ellis took charge of the Passenger Equity Oversight Committee. Dr. Olivia Harper and Marcus Coe founded a non-profit organization called Equal Skies, dedicated to training corporations and providing legal support for those who had experienced unfair treatment. As for Marcus, he became the head of the transportation equity practice at Sterling and Keller, leading a team that protected passenger rights across the United States. One afternoon, as he boarded a flight back to Chicago, a young flight attendant greeted him with a respectful smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Reed. Thank you for making our industry better." Marcus simply smiled, looking out the window, where sunlight glowed softly over the airplane's wing. It had all begun because he refused to give up his seat, and that refusal had made the entire sky bow before justice. 1 year later, at the ceremony, celebrating the launch of the Passenger Equity Act, hundreds of people gathered beneath the dome of the Capitol. Marcus Reed stepped onto the stage, his expression calm as the lights reflected off the words behind him. "Equality takes flight." He looked around and saw Monique Ellis, Andre Collins, Olivia Harper, Alicia Grant, and his father, Henry Reed, seated in the front row. Each of them smiled. "A year ago, I only wanted to sit in the seat I paid for, Marcus," said his voice, resonant, yet warm. "But it turns out sometimes standing still is how we make the world move." Applause rose and spread like waves through the hall. Overhead, a Meridian airplane passed across the sky, its fuselage bearing the new slogan, "Respect is our altitude." Marcus looked up, his smile softening. He knew that no one could erase injustice entirely, but he also understood that when one person dares to stand, millions learn never to bow. That day, the sky was impossibly blue, and justice at last had learned to fly. From the perspective of a leadership ethics expert, the journey of Marcus Reed is not merely a story about discrimination or honor, but a powerful reminder that dignity doesn't need to shout it, only needs to stand firm. When one person dares to remain steady in the face of injustice, they not only defend themselves, but also pave the way for thousands of others to be treated more fairly. If you believe that justice is not a privilege, but a fundamental right of every human being, give this video a like to help spread the message. Don't forget to subscribe to join us in discovering more stories where courage meets fairness. And leave a comment below with a short phrase that reflects your belief in human worth. Keep your dignity.